So I'm currently working on the next illustration in the new project. Like usual, here is the halfway update. I've been developing a lot of it and planning out a direction for it all, and with this drawing I've decided to bring you into the world and create a scene that is going to be called Robot Repair Stall. I'll explain more of the narrative behind all of this in the complete time lapse, but this drawing gives you a further insight into the world and what goes on there. In terms of planning out this drawing, I follow a process that I apply to most things I work on, and so because of that, I thought that whilst this footage is on screen, I can go ahead and talk a bit about that and give some advice on planning out your drawings before really working into them. So first of all of my ideas for drawings relate back to the overall idea for the project, if that makes sense. For instance, I'm developing this world, and so I know that I'll be drawing certain things that will somewhat fit into this theme and also be appropriate for my drawing style. I have already got a rough direction in my head of what I want to do with this project and the drawings that I want to produce, so the next step is planning out these drawings one at a time. So if you have a project like this, you can use that as a starting point and begin by developing your ideas from there. It's good to figure out the requirements of a drawing, the purpose of it. For example, if you want to tell a story or portray something specific, then from that point you can branch off some more focused ideas that aim to do that. You also want to figure out what medium you will be using and what you are comfortable with, because through the planning process it will be helpful to think about how you are going to go about creating your drawings with that medium. You don't want to go into a final drawing using something for the first time. You want to have some experience with the tools so that you are more confident. I do a lot of my drawings in pencil, and so through the planning stage I'm thinking about how I can draw the thing that I want to using pencils. So now that I know the project I'm working on, the first thing I do is come up with a concept, and for the majority of the time this is just in my head. I get an idea and I start to piece it together and try and imagine the drawing and how it would appear. I also consider the actual process of drawing it as well, and I spend time trying to visualise the details and the compositions of an illustration. Normally though, these ideas and images that I have in my head don't directly transfer over onto the paper, because when I get to work and start the drawing, it sometimes changes or I discover things that I decide in the moment would be more suitable. But in terms of planning in the early stages, before I even put pencil to paper, I'm trying to really get a feel for what it is I'm going to be drawing. I can sometimes be inspired by things that I see or hear, and then that can contribute to these initial ideas that I get. Then once I have all of these ideas in my head, I need to start getting something down on the paper, because then I'm sure that I won't forget it and I have a reminder. I also find that to write something down or to do a quick sketch even can help manage your thoughts. Before I get out the good quality paper, I take a sketchbook and start to draw out some rough thumbnail sketches. These usually look nothing like the finished piece, but within them you can see where my ideas started and then evolved from. I'd like to do a video on sketching some initial thumbnails for a drawing because it's an important part of the process, but to give a quick overview now, when I'm drawing out these thumbnails I'm usually testing out different compositions and layouts. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out angles and the construction in terms of perspective and what's going on in the image. It's good to have some direction when you start on the final drawing, so this is the part of the process where you can take your time, make changes and experiment. In this thumbnailing stage, you don't have to be accurate with your drawings either. You're able to make mistakes and sketch things loosely. It's all about generating ideas, and it's probably the most important part of planning out a drawing. Now it's normal to get started right away on the final drawing after you've settled on an idea from the thumbnail sketches, but before I do that, I like to sometimes make a list of the stuff that I'm going to be drawing, and then I look for some references on the subject. It's good to familiarise yourself with how objects and items appear. For example, with this drawing, I looked at a lot of images of machinery. I looked at smaller things like these robot hands and stuff that would be suitable for the drawing that I'm creating. you'll find that you'll have to draw these things on different angles, and you'll have to have it all look accurate in terms of your drawing, so you won't be working directly from the reference image, but it's good to have that there because it gives you an idea of how things appear, and you can also see the smaller details. Sometimes you'll find that you're familiar with how things look already, so you won't need a reference image, or you might just be working purely from your imagination. This stage is optional, but it could be helpful in some areas depending on the drawing. Now it's time to get started on the final drawing, and I normally start off by setting up the perspective. I usually have a good idea of what I want from the thumbnail stage, so I locate my horizon line, which is also my eye level, and then I start to draw in an object and locate the vanishing points. If you want to get a better idea of how perspective works, I've done a few videos on the subject, but there's plenty of useful resources out there. But anyways, this is where I take a light pencil and I start to block in a basic composition, so where the main things need to go and the sizes of everything. It's definitely a long process, but it's best to get this down accurately before you work into it later. It might be helpful to create a grid or something else to assist you at this stage. Once I have the perspective planned out and I know where everything needs to go, I start drawing, and I normally use a light pencil so that I can erase things and make changes as I go, and a lot of the time I improvise and change the drawing as I'm sketching it out. Even at this stage I'm creating a detailed outline, because the more I do now, the less I'll have to do later. So once we have all of this drawing lightly outlined, I start to work into this properly. I lay down some shading and start texturing objects. I also add details and really spend my time rendering the drawing. This is probably the most enjoyable part of the drawing because you've already planned out your outlines, you are confident with how it looks, and you can just start rendering it in any way you like. I'm using pencils, so a lot of this involves shading, texturing, detailing, and you also have to be aware of the lighting and the shadows in the scene. I'm not the best at that, but it's something I'm slowly learning. I'd say the most important thing is to focus on the construction, being able to accurately plan out everything in perspective and then capture a scene. So to wrap this up, here is a quick overview. Firstly, I consider the overall project and work out the requirements for the drawing. Then I come up with some initial concepts and make some notes. Then I jump into sketching out some thumbnails and exploring the idea. After that, depending on the drawing, I'd look for some possible reference images that could be of use. I then start to plan out and construct the drawing before then outlining. Once the drawing is outlined and I have everything in place, I get right into the rendering. And so that, everyone, is the process that I usually work through to create my drawings, and maybe you can take away something from this. If you enjoyed it, then please give the video a like because it helps me out. If you're new around here, feel free to subscribe to always stay up to date. Click the notification bell. I look forward to completing this drawing and showing you the finished time lapse. That's everything. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.